college football playoff rankings were released in a special that we watched last night on ESPN. The biggest difference from last week, 9 and 10. Alabama jumped Notre Dame to get to 9, which leaves the Irish as the last at-large team projected into the bracket. Miami, which beat Pitt 38-7 on the road this week, did not move at all. They stayed at number 12. So if everything were to end this way, which it won't, Miami would be out. I'll remind everyone that they have basically an identical resume to Notre Dame, and those teams played each other, and Miami won, and it looks like Notre Dame is in, and Miami is out, but there are still a lot of things to be figured out. And here are Heather and Paul to explain a lot of it. And Heather, as briefly as you can you explain why it is actually BYU and their game this weekend that will determine so much for these powerhouse teams?
If BYU wins, they're going to be in the college football playoff. And the middle school math says if you add a team into the top 10, another team has to come out. So they would knock Notre Dame out because they're the number 10 team right now. BYU in the Big 12 game is the X factor. If BYU loses, Greeny, that's where it gets really interesting too, because Miami would bump up right next to Notre Dame. Does the committee at that point then consider the head-to-head? Hunter Yurachek said last night that Miami looked good against Pitt, but has not done enough to convince them they're better than Notre Dame yet.
Yes. He also said, in response to a question from Reese, that this year idle teams, meaning teams that don't play this coming weekend, which would include both Notre Dame and Miami, that they can move places depending on circumstances. So I want to fixate on that for just a moment. What you just saw with the resumes, Paul, of Notre Dame and Miami. And we are living in a world, let's just play out this scenario as Heather just pointed it out. BYU loses. They're currently at 11. They fall out. You would then have Notre Dame, theoretically, Notre Dame and Miami next to each other in the rankings with practically identical resumes, having met on the field, and the loser of that game would be in and the winner of that game would be out. A lot of people have a real problem with this, Paul. What do you think of it?
Yeah, Heather said middle school math. That's pretty easy to figure out as well, Greeny. They played each other. I'm well aware, as the audience is, they played at the end of August, but it doesn't really matter because they played. And I don't know how else you could break a tiebreaker than putting the two combatants on the same field and having one prevail. But apparently to Mr. Hunter Yurachek yesterday, they can still move while they're not doing anything. That doesn't make any sense to me. Miami should be in, Notre Dame should not be if it comes down to those two.
Yes, but Paul, because I mean they are remembering games that got played at the end of August selectively. If Texas didn't lose to Ohio State at the end of August, then we'd be having an entirely different conversation about them. So this, again, there are so many emotions that are involved in this. And I was texting with Heather and I was texting with Herbie, and people get so emotional about all this stuff. If the roles were reversed, I'd be saying the exact same thing. I don't care about Notre Dame or Miami one way or the other. But if the outcome of a game that was played on the field, Paul, isn't the difference maker, then what in the world are we doing here?
Well, it's the problem with what we're doing here. As exciting and as crazy as it all is, and as riveted as we will be on Sunday, tell me some other sport or some other profession, or professional sports for that matter, where you let people go into a room and decide. That's not how the NFL works. That's not how any other works. In the NCAA basketball, they do pick a committee picks 68 teams, but ultimately that's a totally different situation than what we're talking about. I just don't understand that, and I think they are going to leave themselves a landmine and a precedent that they'll never be able to over or outrun if they put Notre Dame in over Miami. The resumes are pretty similar. They're making a major, colossal mistake by doing that, if that's how we end up.
I mean, just think about what they would be looking you in the face and saying, I know they played each other, and I know their resumes are essentially identical, but it is just our opinion that this one team is better than the other team, and that's how these things will get decided. Again, their strength of record. So to me, that's the most important metric in all of this. how would a normal team have fared against this schedule that you played, better or worse? And they are next to each other. They are identical in practically every way that matters. So to me, this is the first place that I find it infuriating. Now let's get to Alabama, Heather. They jumped the Irish. They're at number 9. They are playing in the SEC championship game this weekend against Georgia, a team that they beat at Georgia earlier this year. Is Alabama safely in?
I would say that Alabama has margin for error, but I'm not going to call them a lock. And the reason why is because I'm at the Gaylord Hotel where they have these meetings, and I remind everyone it is the only time that they've watched these games together as a group. And if for some reason Georgia is beating Alabama like it beat Texas, when the committee dropped them to 17 after they beat them 35-10, how the game unfolds matters. That's why I'm not calling them a lock, because they watch it, they stand up, they go to the next room, and then they vote on it. If it's a close game, I think Alabama's safe, and I think that that was an indicator at number 9. But again, how it happens matters.
Because, Paul, the alternative, here's where the next argument comes in. You're much better off at this point being Ole Miss or Oklahoma and not have qualified for the SEC championship game and thus not have to play this weekend and be completely safe. If they knock a team out for looking bad in a conference championship game that would otherwise have been in, that's an even worse precedent that they are setting. And you might be living in a world now where teams refuse invitations to the conference championship game. What do you think of it, Paul Finebaum?
That would be the end of conference championship games as we know it. They're billion-dollar adventures, but it is so absurd to hear what Heather just said. As rational as she is and as smart as she is, I'm just about to jump out of my chair and scream the fact that these committee members, they all sit there and they have their caviar and their Don Perignon together. Then they go into the next room and make what could be the dumbest decision in the history of sports to deny a team who beat the team that just beat them on their home field in the regular season, and now they're playing what's tantamount to an exhibition game because nobody else, other schools in their league are not playing because they did not qualify. So this committee is going to look Kalen DeBoer and Alabama in the eye and say, sorry, we didn't like the way you performed in the fourth quarter when the game was 3 touchdowns down and you were a little bit sluggish and you didn't get your running game going. Greeny, that should end college football right there if that happens.
I mean, the Paul's going far. I don't know that I would end the sport entirely, but the conference championship games, I think, would be in serious jeopardy because we should not be in a place. Heather, I mean, the argument, we've heard it many times. We should never be in a place where qualifying for the conference championship game can be a negative. Like that, you cannot live in a world where it can hurt you to play in that game, because if you do, then you are incentivizing teams to literally turn down an invitation. I don't know how that process would work.